Jefferson County Prosecuting Attorney Solo co-host
Solo,
today.
fine Solo. Yeah, we made it through the first segment.
Pressure's on.
Yeah, pressure's on. I like it. I like pressure.
Yeah, John Gilstrap is traveling. Matt Miller was filling in for him. He got the flu. Got a text from him early this morning. He got the flu. One of our other guests later this morning got the flu. And I think it was just a couple of days ago somebody else canceled because they got the flu. That's kind of going around. Let's hope our next guest doesn't have it either right now. He is the West Virginia State Democratic Party Chairman, Delegate Mike Pushkin out of Kanawha County, the 54th. Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well, but now I'm a little concerned. I hope I don't catch the flu just from appearing on this show.
I hope not too, man. It seems to be going around. I got a flu shot this year, and I've, to this point, managed to avoid any illnesses throughout the winter, which is very unusual in this job.
So far so good. And I'm down here, and it's in the Capitol, which I like to call the bad idea factory, and also has a lot of the germs floating around. People tend to get sick down here during session, but so far I've been fortunate and have remained fairly healthy during session. Aside from one slip and fall I had in the East Wing that has injured my knee. Other than that, I'm good.
Dang.
Delegate Pushkin, last time you were on, it hurt my feelings. I had a work obligation, and I was driving away, and I heard you say, "I hope he didn't leave on my account."
I was just kidding. I know you didn't leave on my. Yeah.
So now you get me with
solo.
Almost solo. Yeah. So
yeah.
I had forgotten about that, actually.
And he would have appreciated what I was doing. I was actually going to Berkeley County Commission, because of our day report situation, to seek coverage for our Jefferson County day report participants because our day report decided to close.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate that they had to close the day report there, but at least everybody is. So you're able to enroll everybody over in
Berkeley
County.
Yeah, and to be clear, the day report, Jefferson Day Report, is a nonprofit, and their board voted to close. It wasn't a county agency decision.
Well, as long as the folks are getting
they are
the help that they need and that diversion that they need, and hopefully keep everybody out of jail and prison if they do the right thing and get them back on the right path, and that's all good.
And get them back to work.
Yeah, keep them working.
On that note,
I agree.
Tim Zaya will be our 9:30 guest this morning. He is the Community Corrections Director in Berkeley County as well. Mike, I want to talk to you about a couple of things. First and foremost, you are a minority chair of Health and Human Resources, and we had Mike Height on earlier in our first segment. Can you tell me, coming out of that committee, what you know about Medicaid funding in the state of West Virginia at this time?
Well, I think there would probably be, first of all, it'd be a better question for somebody on finance. That's where they deal with the funding. But I can tell you, there's three different budgets. You have the governor's proposal, you have a House budget, and you have a Senate budget. And then, over the next few days, they're going to reconcile these budgets. The House budget is what I would call a skinny budget, and it really underfunds a whole lot of things. And there are major cuts to Medicaid in the House budget, and that has a lot of people alarmed, as it should. When you're talking about Medicaid, you're talking about the waiver programs for people that are would like to keep their loved ones in at home, where they're able to take care of them if whether it's the IDD waiver program for intellectual and developmental disabilities or the age and disabled waiver program. I think AD waiver in the House version had some pretty severe cuts to it from what I saw. Like I said, I do not serve on the Finance Committee, but from what I saw, there were some pretty drastic cuts there. I think the Senate budget seems to be slightly better, but we'll see what we wind up with. But to me, the most important thing going into these budget negotiations are making sure that these folks who really need a little bit extra help from the government continue to get that help as far as these waiver programs go.
You are not on finance, but obviously every committee that delegates serve on is affected by what finance does. And
that is correct.
There's a lot of discussion in this area about West Virginia birth to 3. and the actions of Vernon Chris, the finance chairman, who did not allow funding for West Virginia Birth to 3 to come to a vote. What do you know about ways of funding West Virginia Birth to 3? And from this perspective, these folks haven't had a reimbursement rate increase since 2003.
Well, I am in full support of the legislation. Unfortunately, it was never taken up, and it looks like it will not be taken up by House Finance. However, it could still be funded, but I would like to give those people a reassurance that it will be by passing the legislation and codifying it. But nothing would preclude the Finance Committee from, when it's all said and done, to fund that program in the final version of the budget, which I'm hopeful that they will do. Of course, that doesn't, by not passing the legislations, they're not tied to it, which is concerning.
Yes, and there's no way that you can actually make them give a reimbursement rate increase, is there?
I believe that that has to be done by the agency. I might be wrong, but I'm fairly certain the rate increases are set by the agency and not by the legislature. I know that's how it is with the waiver programs, but it would be a lot easier for everyone if they would have just taken up the legislation and solidified it, put it in the code. Instead, there's a lot of people that are still, wondering what's going to happen. But I'm hopeful that there is money there to put into it. Hopefully, we continue to fund it this year.
You are on education.
I say we. That's one of my own pet peeves. I'm not going to say we. They. Because I was for the legislation all along, and so were the rest of the Democrats up here.
Yeah, and as a super minority, I guess if there's a super majority, there's a super minority. There's limited influence that you have on getting anything passed as well.
Well, I would beg to differ. I think we get a lot of things done, even though as small as our numbers are. We work very well together and across the aisle, and do get some things done. It might not always have our name on it, but we're influencing every decision that's made up here.
Appreciate your input.
Sometimes we'll take a really bad idea and make it slightly less bad, and that's still a win.
You take wins where you can get them.
That's right.
What pieces of legislation do you think are really important that have passed so far?
That have passed so far?
Yeah, that you're proud of and support.
Yeah, that's a tough question because what's been done so far, I think, unfortunately, I feel that a lot of times when you have such a lopsided majority, these politicians tend to do what they want to do rather than what is needed. So there's a lot of things so far that have been left undone.
Let's talk about that. What do you think has been left undone that's the most important?
Well, first thing that comes to mind, we haven't addressed PEIA.
Okay.
Going into the session, that's what I heard a lot about. Yeah, and there are a whole lot of folks that affects whether they or their family members work in the public sector. It also affects a lot of our sheriff department, county sheriff's departments. It affects some of our municipalities that are in the public employees insurance system. And 2 years ago, they passed a bill that raised the premiums, and since then they've raised twice. And they're looking at another one coming up real soon, and that's effectively a pay cut when their insurance rates go up, but they don't get a pay raise to offset that, which there is no pay raise in the works for any of these folks. That's a pay cut, and it affects so many other issues because we have a hard time getting people to work in these very important jobs, whether it's teachers in the classrooms, cops on the street, correctional officers in our jails and our prisons. People to work in a very difficult job in child protective services where we have an overburdened system and not enough people to look after these kids. We're not going to be able to attract people to these jobs if we keep cutting their pay and raising their premiums. So that's a major thing that has been left undone. Access to child care. There have been a few bills to address it. None of those have passed yet. But I don't think it really is going to improve access enough, the bills that they've passed. Same with bills on foster care. There's a few bills that are still moving. I think they've kind of put some of them into one bill. A lot of them haven't passed a lot of the bills to address the foster care system, but even those are still kind of just tinkering around the edges. They don't really get to the root issues that have caused the system to be so overburdened. Go ahead.
I was going to say Senator Deeds recently made a floor speech kind of echoing your sentiments that he was asked about what they had accomplished, and he couldn't come up with a really good answer. Is that a common sentiment amongst the legislatures in the Capitol this year?
Those that tell the truth. Yeah, it's a common sentiment over those that tell the truth. I believe the Senate Judiciary Chair, who is soon to be, leaving us and joining RFK Jr. in Washington D.C. He's said so publicly as well, and he's the Senate Judiciary Chair. What are we doing down here? A lot of folks just can't seem to get out of campaign mode, and they're running these bills that if you turn on Fox News or Newsmax any given night, you're going to hear these non-issues, is what I would call them. That's what they're seeking to address, and it might make for good campaign fodder, but it really doesn't do anything to improve the lives of your average West Virginian. So there's all these bills that target the transgender people. There's bills. There's this anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion bill that I feel is really an affront to the African American community. It's creating this other, creating this perceived threat that we can blame all of our problems on. And it's a very dangerous path to take. If you're a student of history, societies that have done this, well, what comes after that's not always great. So those bills really bother me, and it's taking away time from what we need to be focused on. And there's a whole lot of issues that we need, the people of West Virginia need us to focus on, and instead they're playing politics.
Could some of it be attributed to you have a new administration in the governor's office and you have new leadership on the Senate side? It's just kind of some growing pains, and it could cause some drag on the process.
Well,
or is it more than that? Or is it more than that? You're down there.
I'd say that's a lot of it. You say as a growing pains. Governor Morrissey was the Attorney General for 3 terms before he became governor. You'd think he would have grown up by now. But no, he is purely focused on political issues. He cannot seem to get himself out of campaign mode and do what is needed rather than what he wants to do. And I think that's why a lot of his legislation has failed, because it's not what's needed. Nobody going into the session was like, Governor Morrissey, could you please weaken childhood immunization standards for us? Nobody wanted that. We had so many phone calls and emails of people telling us, don't weaken childhood immunization laws, especially in the midst of a nationwide measles outbreak. Where unfortunately we've already lost 2 children in Texas. There have been cases in neighboring states, like in Kentucky and in Maryland. And this governor, he makes one of his top goals to weaken childhood immunization laws. Luckily, the bill died in the House, but they keep, they're wasting all this time in the Senate trying to sneak it into every single other bill that even comes close to it in code.
That's 600 cases in 22 states now, with the measles cases being reported.
And this is what some Republicans want to focus on: weakening childhood immunization laws. It's ridiculous. We have a lot of real issues that we need to deal with in West Virginia that are being left undone, while they, like I said, do what they want instead of what's needed.
What is the likely success of the Senate's attempt to reinvigorate that vaccination bill in the House, Mike?
I'd say, luckily, I'd say it's 0 to none. I don't think the House has the appetite for it. And there are a lot of very vocal members that are in favor of that, but luckily they're in the minority. And the bill it wasn't close. There was bipartisan opposition to it, and I don't see. If anything, I would say that some folks might change, who were in favor of it might have changed their vote after hearing from the public.
You are on education as well, and the House Committee on Finance on Monday morning removed an appropriation of $1.25 million in House Bill 3369 that was for school safety measures and to be used by the end of the current fiscal year. What do you know about House Bill 3369 and these school safety measures?
Well, I think it's a mistake to remove that funding, especially when we're seeing how much money is going into the Hope voucher program, and how much of that is unregulated. We've got money going out of state. We've got more and more reports of the voucher money going to pay for extracurricular activities, horseback riding lessons, travel soccer teams. That's going on. That's with our tax dollars going to people who they don't necessarily need the money for tuition at a private school, or using it for extracurricular things. And there's very little regulation, practically no regulation on these funds. And then, to make matters worse, you see where they're defunding things that are important, like keeping our kids safe at school. So it's a problem. I would like to see a better regulation of the vouchers, and then maybe we could fund these important measures in our public schools.
Clay Riley said school boards, county boards of education, already have $784 million in unencumbered funds. They could use that money to pay for these safety measures, Mike.
Well, we'll see. I've not seen that. To me, taking money away from public schools and putting more and expanding the voucher program is not the way to go. They're defunding our public education, and the money for the vouchers, it's not enough to send a poor or working class kid to a private school. It might subsidize it a little bit, but a lot of this money is going to folks that are doing quite well financially, and then they're using that to pay for horseback riding lessons. I don't think anybody would agree with that.
You also sit on educational choice, so tell me how that works, because I know you're a strong backer of public education. What sort of educational choice do you support?
I mean, I support choice, but I don't want to see tax dollars pay for it. And I think I would be for, say if there was a cutoff on the voucher system, or it was only for those who really needed it. And I know that some kids do better in different settings. I understand that. I'm all for choice. But I think the way that the Hope vouchers have been just unregulated, and then they go to anybody that applies, no matter how much money they make. There's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse there. So I keep an open mind. I know people who homeschool. I know a lot of people who have to send their children to private schools. Many of the private schools that at least down here, they didn't ask for this. They didn't ask for any special help. They were doing quite well. So my concern has always been these kids that really need it, and we need to make sure we have strong public schools so we don't leave any kids behind. Unfortunately, a lot of kids are living in single-parent homes or being raised by grandparents at this time, and they don't have that extra help. And the voucher's not going to be enough to send them to any other, to give them a choice. And I'm concerned about those kids.
In regards to the education bills that have come out, including a school discipline bill, is that new school discipline bill going to become law?
It looks like it will, and I think it's a huge improvement over what we had last year. I think that the committees did do their due diligence and work with some folks who had some concerns about the law last year. I still have some concerns about it. I hope that it's followed by some funding to get some behavioral health professionals into the schools to actually work with these kids. We're hearing these stories about kindergartners who are a threat to their teacher. What the heck's going on there? Why is this child acting like this? And that's what we really need to look into. I don't want to see them removed from public school for permanently, and then who knows what happens to them. These kids are going to grow up. These kids are our future, and we've got to do better by them. So like I said, I voted against the bill, although I do think it is a huge improvement of what we had last year. But I hope it's followed by a serious effort to get some behavioral health professionals into the schools.
Delegate Pushkin, I wanted to ask you to kind of change subjects here. Delegate Height was on earlier, and he mentioned, and I asked him what is important to him to see cross the finish line here in the next couple of days, and he mentioned that Ibogaine there's a bill potentially floating around about that, and that he thought that had a big potential in West Virginia. Are you familiar with that bill?
I am, and I think most of the legislature is not, and they voted for it. Ibogaine's pretty powerful stuff, and I think it was fun. I have a hard time getting a debate on medical cannabis, which is far less potent than Ibogaine. Ibogaine will. I would not recommend it as a recreational type drug. There, it'll knock you on your butt. But it can be used for a rapid detox. But it could be fairly dangerous. I mean, they have to be hooked up the patients would need to be hooked up to a heart monitor and watched very closely. But it's I think it comes from like a tree bark in Africa, and it'll knock you out. So I think it's something we need to be very careful with. However, I think, if it works, if it gets people, off of opioids, without going through withdrawal, that's a good thing. I voted for the bill. I spoke to the bill. I just wanted people to know what they were voting for. I think most of them didn't. But I think if we're going to have that kind of choice, why can't we fix our medical cannabis laws? In fact, why don't we just legalize it for adult use and let grown-ups make those decisions for themselves?
So, I guess for the listeners that aren't familiar with Ibogaine, could you just and Delegate Height didn't really cover it, except that it's a potential powerful treatment in substance use disorder.
It's a naturally occurring drug. I believe it's from a tree bark from a tree in Africa. I think it used to be used in tribal type vision quest type stuff. I mean, it's fairly potent. I think it's probably more potent than the stuff that Aaron Rodgers is going off into the jungle and
ayahuasca.
To determine whether or not he's going to play for the Steelers or not. It's stronger than that. I don't think most folks knew what they were voting for, because a lot of folks who were vehemently against legalizing cannabis voted for this. I don't think they knew. That's fine. I voted for the bill. It's not the bill I'm following the closest. I actually have a bill that's set to pass that I'm lead sponsor of, and that would require utilities to have a communication plan in place to communicate with the ratepayers when there's an outage. You would think that would already be the law, but unfortunately, last year down in here in Charleston, we learned that was not the case, and that a lot of us were without gas for several weeks and had very little communication from the gas company over there. So that bill is looking like that bill's moving, and it should pass.
So that would require utilities to give pre-notice of outages, or
if
just
it's a planned outage, correct. If it's a planned outage, a pre-notice. If it's an accident like we had on the west side in 23, that they would at least have to communicate. Keep people informed. We were getting all of our information from the news. We were hearing nothing from the gas company when that was going on. And you would think that would already be the law, and most utilities already do it, but it would just require them to have a communication plan in place that would be approved by the Public Service Commission.
Well, we're just about out of time.
I was going to say, for in some sort of catastrophic event, you would want that structure already in place.
Yeah, well, this requires them to have that structure in place. You would think it would already be the law. It is not. So that one should pass, and I hope Governor Morrissey, puts any kind of personal grievance he may have with me aside and signs the bill when it winds up on his desk. But there are a whole lot of things that that really we need to do that really, unfortunately, have just been left undone.
Mike, on that,
it's our most biggest priority is Ibogaine. We're doing it wrong.
Hey, I appreciate your time this morning, Michael.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Thank you. That's Delegate Mike Pushkin out of the 54th. He is